go to the crane just hurts.
Mourning the people killed in Saturday's crane collapse.
I don't know of a person that could say a bad word or a bad thing about him.
How they're being remembered as investigators start piecing together what went so horribly wrong.
I seen my wife falling down to the floor.
A heartbroken store owner relives the moment his wife was gunned down before his very eyes. How the community is rallying around the family as detectives set a deadline for the killer to turn himself in. And a military family out thousands of dollars in cleanup costs after learning that their home is contaminated with meth. Why an inspection didn't uncover the hazard and the changes they want to see statewide.
You're watching Como News at 6.
We start tonight with a live look from Air 4 over Mercer and Fairview, where the investigation continues into Saturday's crane collapse that killed 4 people.
Dash cam video released today shows the collapse as it happens. You can see the crane start to tilt on the roof of a new Google building before toppling over or freezing it before pieces hit the ground out of respect to the victims' families.
This afternoon, we learned that the 4th person killed in Saturday's collapse was Alan Justad, the former deputy director of the Seattle Department of Planning and Development. The other victims were previously identified as iron workers Travis Corbett and Andrew Yoder and college student Sarah Wong.
We have team coverage tonight, including more on the people who died in the collapse. But we start with Como's Gabe Cohen and the investigation into how this crane collapse happened. Gabe?
And Mary, tonight, pieces of that crane line this construction lot just about a block from where they fell, as LNI announces a 5th company is now under investigation. The video is stunning, that massive tower crane tipping and crashing onto Mercer Street. Now a new video shows the aftermath on the roof. 2 toppled sections of the crane separated beside the base. The State Department of Labor and Industry says the crane was certified last June after it was put up, and no issues were found. Today, some got their first look at the damage.
It's really sad. It's just really a sad day.
Andy Aaron shot this video the morning of the collapse as crews worked atop the crane. LNI is now investigating 5 companies, the general contractor GLY, as well as 4 subcontractors. Northwest Tower Crane, who took the crane apart, Murrow Equipment, who owns the crane, Omega Rigging, who moved the pieces, and now Seabird Construction, who employed the tower crane operator. Northwest Tower Crane and Murrow Equipment were investigated back in 2006 after the deadly crane collapse in Bellevue, but no violations were found. On Saturday, 2 roads behind the building were closed, but not Mercer. The Seattle Department of Transportation says the contractors didn't ask the city to close it. Ultimately, the city leaves it up to them to decide how much space they need. 59 cranes still line Seattle's skyline, the most of any city in the U.S.
This tragedy has been a wake-up call for us to make sure that a thorough review of safety procedures and guidelines and standards is conducted.
The council will hold a hearing Wednesday on what more needs to be done to prevent a repeat in Seattle. And LNI tells me their work at the scene will be done later tonight, but the investigation could take 6 months. We're live in Seattle. Gabe Cohen, Como News.
Thank you, Gabe. The Como weather team is tracking conditions at the time of the crane collapse. They tell us that a Puget Sound convergence zone created blustery northerly winds on Saturday afternoon. Based on nearby observations, there were likely gusts between 20 to 35 miles per hour, which are common in our area.
Well, it's hard to get an exact number here because you have the effects of the building. Generally, winds increase with height. So if the winds are 30 miles per hour near sea level or 20 feet, it could be stronger at 100, 200 feet.
Tower cranes are historically structural components, and they are structurally sound. It's very few and far between that you see any kind of collapse.
It could be months before we know what, if any, role the wind played in Saturday's collapse.
The medical examiner's office has identified all 4 of the people who lost their lives in the deadly crane collapse. We've been telling you 2 of them were iron workers, 1 from near Portland, the other from North Bend. Como's Michelle Esteban has more on Andrew Yoder, a man who lived to serve. Michelle?
Well, Mary, one of the first things that we learned about him, you can actually see right here in this flag memorial. This is on Mercer, right where the accident happened. He was all about serving God, country, and family.
I don't know of a person that could say a bad word or a bad thing about him. He was the best of us.
He's talking about Andrew Yoder, the 31-year-old father of two.
He's a great family man.
Andrew was a member of the Iron Workers Local 86. Chris McLean is the local's business manager.
So our goal every day when we go to work is to make sure that we return home safely.
Andrew was one of the two iron workers who died when the crane they were in collapsed Saturday. McLean says the 31-year-old spent 10 years working as a journeyman iron worker, 4 as an apprentice learning the trade.
The training is intense.
The last 5 years, he says he assembled and dismantled tower cranes.
Our hearts go out to the families of both the iron workers and the civilians that lost their lives in this accident.
McLean says their members are still coming to terms with the loss, but what comes easy is remembering the kind of iron worker, the kind of man Andrew was.
We're going to miss him deeply.
Integrity is the word people who know him use to describe him. A friend who served in the Marine Corps with him told me Andrew was a great iron worker and was literally Iron Man, capable and courageous. McLean says he made an immediate impression with everyone he met. He was the kind of guy people wanted to be around. That's what drew so many of his fellow iron workers here to the site where they lost him. The collapsed crane is gone, and in its place, an American flag and a Marine Corps flag.
Andrew is everything that any organization would look to have as far as an example-setting person in their membership.
Back out here live, and what you're looking at is some folks who have been here for about the last 30 minutes. This is the memorial site. This is where the crane collapsed. I am guessing that these are likely students from Seattle Pacific University, but we do not know. There are flowers around the tree here, and of course all of this just below the Google construction site that we have told you about, where this incident happened on Saturday. And I wanted to tell you, I talked to a couple of Andrew's friends off camera. They tell me that the family tonight asking for privacy, the Iron Workers Local 86 offering support to those families, and the Iron Workers Credit Union collecting donations. I'm Michelle Esteban, Como News.
Michelle, thank you. The other iron worker killed has been identified as 33-year-old Travis Corbett of Oregon. He worked for Northwest Tower Crane for about 3 years. Corbett got married last June. His wife Samantha tearfully talked about their time together and her struggle to understand what happened.
Words can't even describe what a good partner he was. He was just the love of my life. And I know that he would want me to be strong, but it's really hard not to just feel so just sad and lost and scared. And he was just incredible. There's no one else like him, and it really sucks that he was taken from this world way too soon.
Samantha and Travis plan to go on their honeymoon this June and possibly start a family after that.
So many incredibly sad stories, and tonight we're learning more about several people in the same vehicle who were all impacted by the crane collapse in different ways. Como's Suzanne Fon joins us live from Seattle Pacific University with more about that. Suzanne?
Yeah, one life was taken, another life was spared. Both of those people were university students here. They were sitting in the back seat of the same car. Classmates tell us how much they'll miss 19-year-old Sarah Wong, the freshman who thought about studying nursing. Friends tell us how much she loved her faith, how much she loved caring for her friends, and much more.
Sarah was one of the nicest people I think I've ever met. She was always really positive and extremely energetic and always smiling all the time.
And she would always greet me with this really big smile.
Witnesses tell us that Wong was in the backseat of a car with a friend when she was struck and killed by the crane collapse. The other passenger in the backseat was also a Seattle Pacific University freshman. Miraculously, that student, Wong's good friend, was not hurt. She was treated and released. Friends believe Wong and her friend were in an Uber when tragedy struck. Today, Uber confirmed to Como News that one of the vehicles involved in the crane collapse was on an Uber trip. We're still waiting to hear the identity and the condition of the male driver. Meanwhile, one survivor from the crane collapse remains in the hospital. Harborview says that 28-year-old man from Linwood should be released any time now. Sarah's church and her school, meanwhile, tell us there could be a vigil later on this week for her. It could be Wednesday night, but the details have yet to be finalized. Live at Seattle Pacific University. Suzanne Fon, back to you.
And be sure to stick with the Como News Network in the days, weeks, and even months ahead for continuing coverage on the deadly crane collapse. We'll have any new information here on Como TV, also on Como News Radio, and online at comonews.com.
And since KOMO News at 4, we've been tracking a crash on State Route 99 here at Des Moines Memorial Drive. Finally in the clearing stages. Finally, both sides of the freeway, as we saw earlier, were brought to a crawl because of this box truck. This is what it looked like a little while ago, back about an hour ago when we brought this to you live on the air. You can see the two cars there, and then also that box truck in the center divide really bringing traffic to a slow there. But as you can see now, it's in the clearing stages, things moving along. Just a few more things to get out of there, and it should be all clear.
We may start seeing fewer derelict RVs on the streets of Seattle. Some people who live in the vans are being blamed for increased crime and garbage in the neighborhoods where they park. In tonight's Project Seattle report, KOMO's Matt Markovich joins us from one such neighborhood with more. Matt?
Yeah, the city has a new term they call a herd of RVs all parked together, no longer an encampment. That's ranching. And for many, RV is all they have, and that's all they have to live in, and they're just looking for a safe spot to park. But for many neighborhoods, ranching has become a perennial problem.
They tried to make this turn.
It's been a year since a shuttle bus made into an RV crashed into a West Seattle health club and burned. Weeks later, another RV rolled down a hill through its parking lot and into a creek.
Do you move around?
Yeah. It doesn't look like it, but I do.
Steve parks near the club, a regular RV rancher I've met before, plays the game well, keeps his spot clean, avoids conflict. He didn't want to show his face.
And I think that a lot of these people are abusing the privilege.
A privilege, he says, of parking longer than the legal 72-hour limit. It's the junkers that can't move that are spoiling it for guys like him, he says.
Yeah, I see them all the time. They, like, half of them are towed.
Like the one right behind him, still has the tow ropes on, towed possibly from a North Seattle lot where the city impounds RVs and sets them for auction if the owner doesn't claim them. Seattle police are now filing junk affidavits on impounded RVs, putting them into a queue for destruction rather than auction.
Well, I'm very excited to see this momentum.
Aaron Goodman runs the Business Improvement Association in Soto, the scene of RV fires, crime, and dog bites tied to RVers.
I feel we've turned a corner and that the city is really taking the situation in Soto seriously.
Now, you see those ropes there in front of that RV? I was told by some of the people who are living in this ranch that that RV was just towed here a few days ago. It doesn't work. Coming up in our complete story tonight at 11, we're going to take a look at some new numbers from the city about just how bad the problem of recycling these RVs from towing to impound to auction and back on the street, just how bad the problem has become. Reporting live in South Seattle, Matt Markovich, KOMO News.
Thanks, Matt. If you have a tip from Matt and the Project Seattle team, call 206-404-4732. You can also email projectseattle@komonews.com.
The rest of the house still has residual contamination.
A military family forced from their dream home by a meth contamination, the expensive cleanup, and why their initial home inspection failed to find the danger.
Stormy tonight in the Cascades. I'll let you know if the April showers hang on for the final day of the month in my forecast.
Plus, a beloved store clerk dies after being robbed and shot in the back. Heartbroken friends and neighbors share their loss as police issue an ultimatum to the getaway driver. Coming up.
And welcome back. We're following breaking news. Clark County Sheriff's Office just put this out on Twitter. This, what you see here in this pond or this small piece of water here, is a single-engine plane that crashed. And they just tweeted out saying that 2 people are dead after this crashed. And this is in the Daybreak area. Again, Clark County Sheriff just putting this out. Of course, we're following this, working to learn more information. As soon as we have that, we'll bring it to you live on the air here on KOMO and, of course, on KOMOnews.com.
A Navy family is finding out the hard way that home inspections don't include looking for methamphetamine contamination.
As we first reported exclusively last week, the family is on the hook for the expensive cleanup. KOMO's Keith Eldridge says Ryan and Katie Barnes are hoping to get the inspection requirements changed.
We have to finish painting the walls and the ceilings.
Katie and Ryan Barnes hope their nightmare is about to come to an end. When their child kept getting sick, they had the home they bought a year ago tested for mold. Instead, it came back positive for meth. They came to us to tell their story.
Someone is responsible for this, and it's not us. We didn't know.
They had the home inspected before they bought it. Why didn't the meth show up? We took that question to licensed home inspector Darren Buckley.
We're not required to do mold testing or meth testing or things of that nature.
That's right. State licensing regulations do not require it.
We're limited. We can't do anything destructive or intrusive to the property. And rarely do we have really any idea of the history of a building when we approach it.
He says a buyer or seller can ask for a meth test, but that's extra. The Barnes want that changed.
We want to make it mandatory for either the people buying the house or the people selling the house or the realtor.
They say you can buy a testing kit for between $50 and $200 and do it yourself. So far, the Barnes are out $20,000 of their own money since insurance doesn't cover that kind of pre-existing condition. And you'd have to prove the seller knew about the contamination to go after them. And the expenses continue to mount. They're getting ready to put on the protective paint. Take a look at these, $180 a can. But there is help. After our story aired and was shared online, donations poured in, including $12,000 in an online fundraising site.
The community has blown us away.
We're just overwhelmed with the amount of support we've gotten from the community itself.
In Port Orchard, Keith Eldridge, KOMO News.
The Barnes hope to be able to get the final cleanup touches done over the next 2 weeks and be able to move back in after being forced out now nearly 3 months ago.
Cook Aquaculture has agreed to pay a $322,000 settlement to the Department of Ecology after a floating fish pen collapsed near Cypress Island in August of 2017. About 250,000 non-native fish were released out into Puget Sound. An investigation found that Cook had poor net cleaning, maintenance, and water quality violations. This disaster led lawmakers to phase out fish farming of non-native species starting in 2022. Cook is allowed to continue operations at the Cypress Island facility until then.
As the measles outbreak spreads into other parts of the country, public health officials in Clark County say their measles outbreak is over after no new cases in the past 6 weeks. Health workers say 71 people in the county got infected. Most did not get the vaccine. Meantime, new numbers in from the CDC show that right now there are 704 measles cases across the country, and nearly 3/4 of those infected were not vaccinated.
Turning now to the weather, and what a gorgeous day it has been outside, right? This is a live look at the Ballard Locks. Plenty of sunshine close to Seattle today. We've also seen some fairly imposing clouds in other places. Shannon is here to tell us more about it. Shannon?
Yeah, you could kind of see as that shot widened out, it looks so sunny in the foreground, and then back in the distance, the dark skies were looming. We've had those thunderstorms bubbling up right on schedule near the Cascade foothills this afternoon. Lots of pictures flooding into our KOMO website. The LOZ, the Legion of Zoom, we have going on Facebook, including this one from Bree. She said the clouds looked very angry as they were starting to get very black there around Bothell and Kenmore just a few minutes ago, and that's where we do indeed have some heavier showers in the mix right now. Really, most of the action has been limited to the Cascade foothills. The I-5 corridor has been spared, thankfully, for this Monday evening commute. So we'll go in there for a closer look and see the leftover showers actually are starting to lose some of their oomph, which is good news. They won't be terribly heavy for the tail end of this commute, but you can see the rain is stretching all the way down through Newcastle, the S-curves, which are always painfully slow rain or shine, and right now it's raining on you. Those showers continue in this lineup past Sahalee and Duval and Carnation, back toward Monroe, where we had some good thunder and lightning and hail going for a spell, but it looks like at this point it is starting to quiet down. The view over Lake Washington, commuting still looking dry across the lake. You head there toward 405, and as we saw on the radar, there are certainly a couple of wet pockets this evening. Temperatures starting to cool off too. We had hit the low to the mid-60s this afternoon. Now we're back to 59 degrees, a northeasterly breeze, which is actually going to be a big factor in our weather the next couple of days. Temperatures currently elsewhere, 60s, including in Shelton, where we started out very cold this morning. We were in the 30s, but we hit 65 this afternoon. Low 60s around Semiahmoo, upper 50s right now in Tacoma. And again, the northerly winds both at the Ocean Beach communities and all the way through Puget Sound as well. In fact, they're northeasterly at the moment. Now, northerly winds are a big deal because they do tend to crank up the heat around here. They bring warming. They also bring drier weather. And as this area of high pressure continues to grow to the north of us over the next 24 hours, the air will be pushed out and away from it. So if the high sitting in BC, we get the northerly winds. That warms us up, and temperatures tomorrow for the final day of April going to be back into the mid-60s. A really nice finish to the month. At the same time, when you have clearing skies overnight, it gets chilly. So remember, Shelton hit the mid-60s today. We dropped to nearly freezing there tomorrow morning. So certainly jacket weather at the bus stop, but at the same time, a beautiful finish to the month with a nice afternoon. Mid-60s around Monroe. Should be thunderstorm-free tomorrow in eastern Snohomish County. Mid-60s around Fife and back toward Lake Steilacoom as well. Low 60s tomorrow. Nice Tuesday in Friday Harbor. Ocean Beach communities finish up April with upper 50s, low 60s, and loads of sunshine around First Beach and Seabrook too. And in eastern Washington, back into the 50s and the 60s, warmest around the Columbia Basin and into wine country. Up over the Cascades, tomorrow looks much quieter for the hikers, so we get rid of the thunderstorms. There's May Day on Wednesday. Valentine's Day. Nice one for dropping the May baskets with the cookies and the flowers and the goodies at your neighbor's doorstep. It cools a little bit into the next few days of the month, but it looks overall pretty nice and dry. We do it every year in my house. I know you're giggling and Eric's rolling his eyes, but
does anyone else do it?
They are very thankful when we drop off the flowers at our next door neighbor's house.
I think what a lovely tradition.
Do it.
Lovely.
If my mom did it, we keep doing it.
But you make it sound like everybody does it.
No, very few these days.
Thanks, Shannon.
Thank you, Shannon. A new report accuses Angie's List of making biased recommendations on its website.
Connie is next with what a national consumer group says you should do if you use the rating service and how Angie's List is firing back when we come back. There's a big consumer group that is taking Angie's List to task for the way in which it chooses contractors and how they get top recommendations on the website.
The Consumer Federation of America says the recommendations are biased. Consumer problem solver Connie Thompson is here with a new report released today. Connie?
Yeah, the Consumer Federation of America is an established nonprofit composed of hundreds of consumer groups across the country. CFA says it did an extensive review of Angie's List marketing, annual reports, and website, and found the results you get depend a lot on who pays for advertising.
The businesses that they recommend to solve your particular service problem are not necessarily the best businesses.
Steve Brobeck co-authored CFA's Angie's List evaluation. He says when you join the Home Services website, you can find great recommendations for contractors. But CFA says some of the top recommended companies could have fewer reviews and lower ratings than businesses farther down the list.
Some of the businesses they recommend only have 1, 2, 3 customer reviews. That is not an adequate basis for an A rating.
Brobeck's advice, take business advertising out of the equation.
And go directly to the consumer reviews. Look at the consumer reviews for those businesses with at least 25 reviews and have an A rating.
In response to the CFA report, Angie's List says it takes pride in the quality of home service professionals in its network and does not limit how many pros can receive a high grade. In a statement to Como News, the company says this report is operating on key incorrect assumptions and a fundamental misunderstanding of the various ways that consumers can use Angie's List. It is incorrect to assume that because part of our revenue is generated through advertising, that our reviews are anything but fair and impartial. According to Angie's List website, businesses are not obligated to advertise, and advertising does not affect their ratings, which come from consumers. But advertisers do get increased visibility. The CFA report also raises concerns about how Angie's List shares consumer information. You can read the full report and Angie's List's full response to the statement in the consumer section of ComoNews.com.
There's something to be said for following the money, right?
Or
as always.
Reading all of the fine print.
Thanks, Connie.
All right.
Thank you. Still ahead on Como News at 6.
Right now, investigators are searching for the man who gunned down the 79-year-old owner of this Puyallup convenience store. I'll tell you about her life and the legacy she left right here in this neighborhood.
It's a packed field in the race for the White House, so how can a candidate stand out, and how big are bragging rights when it comes to the economy? I'm Scott Thuman in Washington with a look.
You're watching Como News.
Pierce County detectives are working around the clock to find the man who fatally shot a beloved convenience store owner after robbing the business in Puyallup.
It happened Saturday in broad daylight. Como's Kara Costner reports the detectives have located a car connected to the brutal crime.
The memorial that now surrounds the South Hills Handy Corner store is an illustration of what 79-year-old Sue Nam meant to her customers.
You know, always touched your hand when you talked to her, and, you know, just a loving person all the way around.
Sue and her husband Joseph bought the store in 1978 and have been beloved in the community ever since. They were married for 54 years before Joseph watched a gunman take it all away after Sue handed over cash on Saturday night.
I seen my wife falling down to the floor.
Sue had a powerful story. She escaped North Korea when she was young. She would become a professor at Ewha Women's University in Seoul before immigrating to the U.S. to become a business owner. She and Joseph always helped other new Korean families adjust to life in the U.S.
I'm shaky, and every time I look at my wife's room, stuff that she always said, I'm sorry.
To try to understand why a woman who made such a difference and impacted so many could be taken so senselessly on this day is more than this neighborhood can comprehend.
It'll never be the same.
And back here in Puyallup tonight, neighbors and customers continue to come to leave messages and flowers for Sue, who will be tremendously missed. I'm told funeral arrangements are underway. A $2,500 reward is being offered for information that leads to an arrest. In Puyallup, I'm Kara Kostanich, Como News.
Kitsap County deputies are looking for 3 men who broke into a gun store near Gorst. Investigators say the thieves forced their way into Burner firearms around 1:45 this morning. Deputies got there 5 minutes later, but the men were gone. Investigators released these surveillance pictures. They don't have good descriptions, though, of either man. There it is. Right now, they don't know how many guns were stolen.
Boeing faces new lawsuits over the deadly Ethiopian Airlines crash. Today, attorneys filed lawsuits on behalf of 10 Canadians who died when the Boeing 737 MAX 8 crashed just minutes after takeoff. One man lost his wife and 3 children in the disaster.
Those 6 minutes will forever be embedded in my mind. I was not there to help them. I couldn't save them. We are here to ensure that planes remain flyable and safe for human beings.
The lawsuits accuse Boeing of negligence in rushing the MAX jets to market. The suits also name an aerospace company in Minnesota that provided parts for the plane.
Those lawsuits were filed the same day as Boeing held its annual shareholders meeting. This is a live look at the company's plant in Renton, where the 737 MAX is built. The MAX line was a big focus of today's meeting in Chicago. Shareholders grilled Boeing CEO Dennis Muhlenberg, questioning him about oversight and transparency.
You don't have to have 300-plus people die every time to find out that something is unreliable.
What are you doing to assure that there's an outside external people who are looking in who have no interest in the outcome?
A shareholder proposal asking for a transparent report of all state and federal lobbying was voted down.
Former Vice President Joe Biden has officially hit the campaign trail. Today he held his first 2020 campaign rally in Pittsburgh, and he took shots at Republicans and the Trump administration.
The stock market is roaring, but you don't feel it. There was a $2 trillion tax cut last year. Did you feel it? Did you get anything from it? Of course not. Of course not. All of it went to folks at the top.
Over the next few weeks, Biden will head through a number of early voting states, including Iowa, New Hampshire, and South Carolina.